This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
You got to take a risk slowly, and it's important to say there's things that I know well and there's things that I don't know well, and it always sounds easy on the outside, right? But, you don't want to change your business too much at once. And I think that's what I realized.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back. I've got a cool guest from Yokohama, Japan. His name is Andrew Brilliant. He's the director of AMB Aero. And AMB Aero is a consulting / aero design firm that he has. And they work with a lot of top-level race teams on, the aerodynamics of the car, obviously. So a lot of the stuff he's done is in time attack stuff that I am familiar with, especially the Nemo Evo race car from the World Time Attack series, which a number of years ago kind of set the level of modifications cars see. And it's a totally crazy car. If you haven't seen it, we can take some pictures of it and put it on our Facebook page and the webpage just to kind of give you an idea of what the car looks like. But here's the man himself. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. And so, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get involved in cars? Take us all the way back to when you were a kid. Give us our background of what you did to get to where you are.
I guess go back that far. I think I was just like most kids. I had all the toy cars and loved cars and, watched Transformers and, that whole thing. I was just always a gearhead and always loved anything that moved or had wheels, So yeah, from there, just had an interest in that, pursued that, in university, they always ask you, what do you enjoy? And that's always the question to decide what you should specialize in. So, at the time I said, I love racing and racing cars, and that meant mechanical engineering back in those days. Nowadays it's aerospace engineering, but so then I kind of went down that path and actually started from mechanical engineering and then went to do aero later, which is quite rare nowadays in the aero world. All the people come from aerospace engineering into motorsport.
And so you obviously have a degree in aerospace. It's aerospace engineering is what your degree is in?
No, mechanical.
Mechanical, okay.
Mechanical. Yeah.
Okay, and what school was that at?
Berkeley.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California.
Okay, in Southern California. Okay.
Yeah, Los Angeles, yeah.
Okay, and so, did you, after you left college, did you, get a job in mechanical engineering or transition into it, or where did you go from there?
No, believe it or not, I sort of got sucked into the software industry during those boom days. So I was paying my way through school, working for a software company. And then it just became a really easy transition to continue doing that. It was, quite high paying, and, most people were just trying to have a job at all out of school. And so that was just presented to me. So I started doing that. And then I got involved, didn't take long to get involved in a racing team. Actually, the owner of the software company that I worked for had a racing car that was running in SECA. And it was a team with an SECA GT car and also a e-production car. And that was my first racing team. So we started out like that, like it was just a weekend warrior sort of hobby thing. And then as we were working on that, I was sort of the go-to guy for anything to do with computers or technology. It just kind of ended up that way. And then I started doing simulation work, like lap time simulation. And we originally started doing that to find gear ratios and mechanical sort of things. And as I started playing with the aero values in the simulation, I'd put in a little bit of downforce here and there, 10 kilogram front downforce, and it'd be like, oh, that's, a tenth a lap. If I could get three things like this, we'd go from mid-pack to, front of the pack. So I just said, there's got to be something to this. And back in those days, when I was in school, CAD had just come out of being 2D.
What was this time frame?
This was the late 90s,
Okay.
So yeah, late 90s. So then I just, CFD was just didn't even exist. It was very, very basic, very elementary. So we just kind of started putting stuff on the car that was, logical and within the regulations. And it made a big difference, really big difference. We were picking up a couple tenths here and there, which, as you know, across a race distance will be a really significant change in your position. So it was just kind of magic. And then I got hungry to learn anything I could about that. And I got my first aero book, and I think I read that book 5 times, cover to cover.
What was the name of that book?
That was Katz's book, which I think is called Designing for Speed, Race Car Aerodynamics,
okay.
Designing for Speed. Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's the best, as close to reality of what we really do as you could get in a book, I think.
Okay.
So, or any of the books that are out there, we all the aero guys seem to kind of hope for another book or a newer book because it feels like things have come a long way. But
who's going to write it, though, right?
The best one. Yeah, that's the problem. And then the other thing is that all that information that we have now has this huge value, and the race teams want to contain it. And, you have everyone. We've got so many non-disclosure agreements. It's like you end up not being able to talk about 90% of what you want to talk about. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that was your software company, or not your software company, but the software company you were working for, and you were already out of college at this time.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then, so how did you go from, doing this kind of side project with your boss or the owner of the company? Is that who it was?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I was the CEO.
Okay.
CEO's team. Yeah.
So how did you go from that to, like AMB Aero, I guess? What's the transition?
Yeah. So it was kind of a slow transition, and it was sort of brought on, I think, by instability in the software business. It was kind of like, well, I started looking at it, and I kept getting more and more jobs with racing stuff, and more people needed the stuff I did, which back then Aero was sort of a side to vehicle dynamics stuff. So I came from vehicle dynamics, mechanical engineering, right? Mm-hmm. And then it just kept growing, and then at some point, the software industry got unstable, and racing's always been unstable, right? That's the hard part of that profession, is that, you get a job and it might be gone 3 months later or a year later, and you've got to find another team. So eventually software was so unstable, I went and said, well, if I got to deal with this instability, I might as well do it for something that I really love, And then I started growing it. And then and then eventually that company kind of hit a rough spot, and, pay got cut. And then I just started saying, well, maybe I'll just ramp up a sales pipeline for this. And then all of a sudden it was 50% of my life, and then it became 100%. So that's just how it happened. It's kind of a slow thing.
So do you think of yourself as an entrepreneur?
I'm not even sure exactly what that means. Like, it kind of dawned on me actually just the other day that when people ask what I do, I suppose I could say I'm an entrepreneur. But, I was never really educated as a businessman or an entrepreneur, so I'm not quite sure I want to claim that title.
Okay, yeah, and I think a lot of the people that we interview has the same mentality, where it's you really enjoy doing this, and it's something you want to do, and you just do it. And it's not like you set out to start a business. It's you just did a business because you like doing it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. A big learning curve, of course, right? Everybody goes through that, but yeah, that's exactly how it happened.
Okay, and so take us into, like, sound like you were just picking up random jobs, and you built yourself into a full-time position. Is that when you created AMB Aero?
Yeah. So, I started basically working in professional racing teams, and then that was still doing a little bit of aero, but doing a lot of vehicle dynamics stuff too. And then I just went and said, okay, I want to do this aero thing. This is what I really love. And it was whenever I did aero stuff, I don't know if you've ever done something where what your skills are, what things you're good at and what things you have a passion for, and then you just find something that's just magical, like you feel like it fits right into all the ways that you think. There's like plus and minuses to everyone's personality and the way their brain works, and then you just find one thing that's just like, this is the thing I want to do. This is the thing I should be doing, and that was very clear to me that it should be aerodynamics. So then I just decided that that's exactly what I want to do, and then I set up company name AMB Aero, and back then was in the States, right? Uh-huh. And then kind of started, and then I came over to Japan actually, which is a really
when did you move
story.
there?
Well, I officially didn't move till later, but I was kind of going back and forth, depending on racing schedules and racing seasons. And for a short time, I was actually doubling up work between Super GT and IndyCar, which was pretty crazy. But yeah, sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, I was going to say, like, what kind of time frame was that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that was 2009, 2010. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe?
Yeah. So that's about the time that AMB Aero officially became AMB Aero.
Okay, so what brought you to Japan? Like, you said that's a pretty interesting story. Go ahead and tell us it.
Yeah. So I was working in American Le Mans, and then I was working for, I don't know if you know LG Motorsports.
Yeah, Lou.
Yeah. So I started working with them, and that was part-time, right? So doing some races with them.
Okay.
And then they had a car fire, and the car burned down, and it was going to take them some months to rebuild. So I kind of had this free time. I could go where I wanted to and do what I wanted to. And then my sister was living in Japan at the time with her husband and their kids. They still live here. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go over and I want to check out these Super GT cars because they had what was at the time the most advanced aerodynamics on GT cars. So I came over and I got hooked up with a GT team here. And then I ended up meeting Yoshi Suzuka, who is my mentor and also now works for me. So I started working and then got involved with him, and around that time won the championship. And then after that, it was kind of really easy to find work, I guess, and had a good reputation. So yeah.
And after it won, then everybody wanted you.
It's kind of a weird thing because it's nobody really knows who designed the car.
Okay.
If you walk around the pit lane and you ask the team who designed the aerodynamics on this car, and it's like, oh, TRD, Toyota, and it's like, well, who are the people involved in that? Nobody knows that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a feather in your hat, but it doesn't put your marketing out there. So it's sort of just something that you can use to get information, get attention, but once you've already got customers. So it was more about like, talking to people, and now you've got a lot more credibility, right? Once you're involved with Suzuka and who Suzuka has a big reputation, and he'd recently done, GT car thing. And so that really helped, with trying to have credibility with people, because you walk over there and like, who's this foreign guy? And, why should we be interested in what he does? And then that makes a big difference.
Okay, so you created AMB Aero in Japan, or was it in the U.S. and then you moved it over there?
In Japan, yeah.
Okay.
While I was in Japan.
So leading up to this, when you were in the States still, you were basically just like a contract worker for teams then? Is that how it was working?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Weekend warrior, or whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now you're in Japan. AMB Aero, it became its own thing, and so you are a business that other race teams hire in to do the aero work on the car. Is that kind of like, does that explain it pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's what I do is a very specialized thing. Mm-hmm. When you talk about ground vehicle aerodynamicists, in the UK there's heaps, right? Because of the Formula One thing. But outside of that, I mean, I probably know most of the, ground vehicle aerodynamicists outside of F1 in Japan and the US, and I can count them on one hand, So there's like an aerodynamics group, like at Nissan, for example, they have an aerodynamics group, but there's, only 5 or 6 people in that, in a company of that size, and they have so much other work that they do besides designing the body of the car. They've got aerothermal stuff and, NVH stuff. So there's very few people who are actually specialized in the shape of cars at all, let alone the shape of a racing car. So it's very, very niche sort of profession.
Okay. So why did you decide to, take this on take all the risk of having it your own company? Is it just natural to have a business rather than just doing it as a contract? Is that kind of the...
I guess I sort of had a vision of how I wanted to do it, and it was very different than how it had been done traditionally. And so to do that, I mean, let's say I worked for any one of the motorsport design houses or the CFD design houses out there, and said, I want to branch off, and I want to bring this. I want to figure out how to bring this technology to racing at all these levels, not just at the manufacturer or big, huge budget level. And it'd be a really hard sell to convince them to go down that path, because, why would you go down a path that's got a lot less money and probably a lot less profit than what they were doing? And I sort of at the time looked at it and said, well, I can probably eke out a living for myself if I just do this, and I can get my name out there. So it was kind of like that. I mean, it wasn't just that I wanted to be a rogue, but it was just that I wanted to change. I wanted to do something new and special and different that no one had done. And I didn't think that I could do that without being out on my own.
That's pretty insightful. So you have a way of, and this is kind of my take on it, you have a way of doing aero and how you want to work on or design a car, and it's easier for you to do it as your own business rather than having somebody else tell you what to do. Is that kind of the take on it?
It's just because of the scale that I wanted to do it on, and that I wanted to focus on figuring out how to make it affordable.
Okay.
So I saw new technologies coming in, like CFD had gone from something, when I got out of school, CFD was something that was done in a laboratory at a university, and outside of that there was nobody, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe 5 years ago, it became something, 5-7 years ago, it became something that you could maybe do on a really nice high-end desktop computer, in a very limited fashion, yeah. Right? And then I just said, I want to whittle away at these cost factors, and I want to look at the big picture of what we're doing and say, what do we need and what don't we need, and what new technologies can we leverage, and how can we modify the way the design is done and what the design is in order to make it cost effective for mid-level or even entry-level motorsport teams, or even enthusiasts. And that was, no one imagined that. Like, if you look at all the rule books out there, there's like nothing about aero in any of the rule books outside of top end motorsports, because no one even imagined that was possible.
And I think the take on that is the only rule I remember for most of the racing series we do is no active aero. That's like the only rule usually. And then sometimes they have a limitation on like width and height, and that's about it, huh?
Yeah. And then, to someone like me, that whole thing's a little, a regulation like that's pretty bizarre. I mean, I see active aero as like, the last 1% or 2%, where having the aero at all is big. I mean, it was a big deal for Formula One, but that's a very different, level of competition and,
right.
And yeah.
Okay, so how has location played a role in your success? So between the U.S. and Japan, does Japan make it easier for you?
I think so. I think there's a few reasons why Japan makes things easier. I think it's easier to manufacture things here, because people do what they say they're going to do. It's just a cultural thing. There's sort of a thing of honor about, if I say I'm going to finish this in 3 months, that I do. Okay. And they'll really, they'll really work hard to make sure that happens. And, I know Americans work hard, but I can't tell you how many times I've had a, carbon fiber shop that's building a race car say that they'll do it in a timeline and been nowhere near that. It's like almost every time. So that's a big deal. I also think that there was a lot to learn from Super GT at the time. Like I said, they had the most advanced aero, so I think that was big. But I think probably even bigger than that, big learning experience for me was meeting Yoshi Suzuka and working with him. I think I've learned so much from that. It's just, decades of experience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, people in the States probably know him from the Nissan GTP cars back in the 80s and 90s that were dominant in the US IMSA stuff.
And so some of those cars were in like the Gran Turismo games, right?
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So have you ever doubted yourself and like thought, if this doesn't work, what am I going to do? And if you did, like, how did you overcome that feeling?
To be honest, like, I had moments when I was designing a car and I knew that we had a target that we had to hit, and if we didn't get that number, the car wouldn't be competitive. And that's 100% on me. That's just my responsibility, or the design team, whoever's designing a car. And sometimes you'll have these time periods where you'll go for weeks of just throwing every idea you've got and everyone's got, and none of them net anything at all. They come back, you lost downforce, you gained too much drag, or whatever it was. So sometimes you go on these stretches where you just start wondering, are we going to make this happen? And what really helped me, I was in a real tough one once, and so of course I rang Suzuka and just told him about it. This was before he started working with me. So then he just said, "That's completely normal. Like that's being an aerodynamicist. Like you just keep going. That's it. Like he's like, you look at a project over time and it's a graph that you keep going up, but there's, he's like, you've only been coming up with nothing for 2 weeks. He's like, sometimes that happens for 2 months." So that made me feel a lot better, just having that perspective. I've been doing this for 40 years perspective, I guess. Sort of helped. Yeah.
Cool. And so what's the worst experience you've had in business?
Worst experience I've had in business was I tried to manufacture some wings, and I tried to do it overseas because the wing was quite large and complex, and I'd get domestic estimates and it was like $8,000 each to make the wing, and I knew I could never sell them for that and and cover the design cost. So I tried to manufacture overseas, and it just ended up being a complete disaster. Dealing with overseas manufacturing, I wouldn't recommend that to anyone.
So,
to
like
be honest.
Language barriers and
yeah, looking back on it, I feel like that wasn't an issue as much as it was the way the Chinese people negotiate.
Okay.
And the way they negotiate is, my sense of it is that they're just, everything is about having leverage to change the price. At least that's the experience that I had, the people I dealt with, and it would just always become unaffordable, or finding the limit of what was affordable and what wasn't. And I sort of came from this idea of building up a trust thing and telling people what I'm selling it for and what I want to buy it for, and, being honest that way. And then next thing you know, the cost is equal to what I'm selling it for. And I'm going, wait, what am I doing here? And of course I already had commitments to customers and had to try and unwind all that, and it ended up costing me a lot of money and a lot of time. So
okay.
that was probably the worst thing I ever had to do in this business. But it's been pretty trouble free, honestly. I mean, learning curve, but never anything traumatic,
And so our listeners, it's clear to our listeners, is you are actually paid to design. You're not paid to manufacture. You're not a manufacturing business, right?
Yeah, that's right. So typically with like a professional racing team, they've already got who builds the car. I mean, it'll already have been contracted, or someone that they work with all the time. And they're usually pretty high-end people, and they do aerospace work and motorsport work, so they're really easy to work with. You send them a CAD model, and, of course there's a little bit of back and forth, but, you get a finished part out of that. And then what kind of got me to do that was I was developing these time attack cars, and the downforce levels kept climbing, and it got to where there was no wing on the market that could do the kind of downforce that I was already designing for. So I had so much front downforce, didn't have enough rear, needed bigger wings, and nobody had anything that was even close. So I thought, well, I gotta manufacture this if I want to keep making this kind of downforce.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where you got out of your wheelhouse. You tried manufacturing something with, I guess, not hardly any experience trying to deal with making it yourself or having somebody make it then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't necessarily about, China as much as it was about my inexperience in dealing with manufacturing and dealing with the Chinese. So that's really what it came down to. And I realized, you gotta take a risk slowly, and it's important to say there's things that I know well, and there's things that I don't know well, and it always sounds easy on the outside, right? It's the, what's that famous one? It's the known unknowns are not the problem. It's the unknown unknowns,
yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's really what it was, I think it's just a learning curve, but you don't want to change your business too much at once. And I think that's what I realized.
Okay. What's something you're doing right now that has you fired up?
Something I'm doing right now that has me fired up that I can talk about publicly. Let me think about that. Well, I can tell you something that we recently finished that really I'm really fired up about, which was we had a long-term project, and we built this prototype wind tunnel for Nissan, and it was sort of an experiment to prove to them about how they could seriously reduce the cost of aerodynamic development and how they could change the way that they do things. And that's, anyone that's worked with a big manufacturer like that knows that that's a real tall order to sort of change the way things are done at a manufacturer. And we spent, years on this project. And after that prototype tunnel went through, then they had us retrofit. They have a big F1 grade wind tunnel at the Nissan Technical Center. And then we also did retrofit on that wind tunnel. So that wind tunnel is now using all of our test apparatus. And, so we designed and built the whole new test apparatus to reduce the scale from 50% to 20%. And that was a big thing for them. That's being used now on every production car that's developed at Nissan. So it was very special. I think, usually in a manufacturer, you work on one small thing and that's it. You don't get to have a big effect on all the cars they do for, let's say the next 10 years or something like that. So that was a very, very special thing for us.
Okay, and so to clarify what you were doing with them is you were miniaturizing their wind tunnel by reducing the scale of the models and the tunnel itself?
Yeah, so the whole concept was really about saying, everyone says that you've got to have a big scale because it's more accurate. Mm-hmm. And our argument for that was, well, the scale should really be scaled to the accuracy requirements of what it is that you're doing right now, right? And the way that cars are designed and manufactured now is they're basically the outside shape is decided by marketing and designers, our artists, right?
Okay.
And then they send it over to the aerodynamicists and say, okay, kind of fix it up. But this outside is, pretty much decided. So, you get little gizmos you put everywhere and, little things that don't really change the outside. But we wanted to change that. We thought that, so much of transport efficiency is about the aerodynamics, whether people realize it or not. And we wanted to change that at a fundamental level, which means you've got to start it earlier in that process. You've got to say, how can we modify this basic shape in order to achieve that goal? And so we wanted to train, firstly, have a tool to train the designers about aerodynamics, right? And if you have something that's a small enough scale that 3D printing is usable, then you can do stuff really quickly and easily, and they can learn. So you end up getting an aerodynamic test process at the design phase. And then the next thing was saying, well, you got a really expensive wind tunnel that's used very selectively because the costs are just unbelievable to operate that. It's an F1 grade wind tunnel. You got to have an F1 budget to run the thing, right? Uh-huh. So we sort of, that became a hedgeway to change their mode of operation to say, no, you need to have an adaptable scale, and you need to be able to say, this is when we should test in that scale, and that's when we should test in 50% scale.
Very cool. EFI University is hosting a new class called Essentials of Operating a Shop. If you're interested in learning how to run your shop more efficiently, this class is for you. For details and to find a class near you, go to EFI101.com and look for the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. Our next class is being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on June 4th, followed by Denver, Colorado on July 16th. Be sure to use a coupon code DIFAL for $50 off when you sign up. Tell us about AMB Aero. Do you rent a space? Do you do it out of your house? Kind of tell us about where you're located.
Yep. Okay. So obviously we've got to have a space because we've got a wind tunnel, in-house wind tunnel, and we've got a lot of computers, right? So the big, computers that we use for CFD solving. So we've got a space, but I do most of my work from home. And I kind of have that as a policy. I think most people should work from home, and you should only hire people that you can trust to be able to work from home. And the reason I do that is I just think it's a quality of life thing for everyone in the business. It gives them a lot more time with their family, not having to commute, and that's a lot of stress that everyone's got. And I think, I just for what we do at this point, I wouldn't want to hire anyone that I had to stand over and micromanage.
Okay. And have you ever written a formal business plan?
Because of the way that my thing sort of evolved, I never had a need to do that. I think most people write a business plan, I think, to sell their business, maybe, to investors or whatever. And so I've written an informal one. I map out this is my plan for the next 2 months and 6 months and 2 years and 10 years, and I think it's important to keep that on there. And I probably should do a business plan. I just never have. I think I'm always been too busy with all the work I got backed up.
You're not alone in that. I think everybody's in that category. So even on your informal business plan, or I guess like, some mental thoughts of your direction of your business, are you able to stay on target with that? Or is it like a slower process than you imagine? Or how does it compare?
I would say the hardest thing is that there's always something that wants to pull you off of that. There's someone who'll be fired up about something, and like, for example, and this was me, I got fired up about that wing thing, and I wanted to do that. And that wasn't really part of where I thought the business could go. And it was like, I thought it could be a little side thing, but it was a big, big mistake, So I think there's stuff, people get a dream about this and that. And I think you just have to, something might be attractive, something might on paper sound really good, but you want to keep taking all of your spare thought time and your spare money and investing it towards the goal. I think that's probably a lesson I recently learned the hard way. But
okay. Do you have any employees, and how many?
Yep. So there's 3 of us total. Yep. And then we've got outside contractor, and my wife helps out sometimes, but that's the main is 3 people.
Okay. And so those people, are you looking for specific people when you hire them? I mean, you're in a very technical, very specific industry, I guess, a niche market, I guess. So how do you find people, and what do your people do for you?
Suzuka was an obvious choice. And then it was just about needing someone to take up some of the sales side of things. Because it was really hard for me, because on the, Suzuka's runs a wind tunnel stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's his specialty, and CFD is my specialty. So any CFD projects we got going, anytime I need to do sales or any of that, it becomes something that pulls me away from that. So I really just needed someone to support the sales side a little bit more, to do, at least all those like initial contacts with customers and stuff that take up a lot of time. So I got someone to do the domestic Japan side sales.
Okay. So you have that person's only doing the domestic stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And I handle the outside stuff. Obviously there's a language thing, most of the people speak English in the world. So. Okay.
So do you guys actively go out and seek work, or does the work usually come to you and your salesperson handles it?
I'm trying to think how to say that, because most of our stuff comes by word of mouth, and there's a rare time when we'll reach out to a team that we just really think, we've got to get involved with that team. Like, we know we can do a lot for them, or that we're just well positioned. And to be honest, that's very rarely worked out. It was just a bit of a gamble. Most of our business just comes from other customers that are happy with the result and talk about it. And we even have one of my customers actually told me, he said, we're so happy with what you do, but we don't want to tell anyone about it, and it's because, it's become a competitive advantage for them. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a problem. So we usually get word of mouth, but it'll always be our customer, and he's got a friend that's in some completely different class of racing or in another country or whatever.
Okay.
So
that's really interesting.
That's usually where we get it. That, and also there's been stuff will get written about us, or we'll co-write something, and then we'll get contact from that. But we haven't done any proper marketing, and we want to change that. We do want to change that.
Okay. Do you find it difficult to manage the people that work for you?
That's always a tough thing for an engineer, learning how to manage, because you spent your whole life learning how to be, or at least I did. I spent my whole life thinking that my technical ability at something was the ultimate value that I could give to what I do, right? Mm-hmm. And then I had to look back at that and say, okay, how do I deal with people better? How do I keep people motivated and happy and do work that they want to do? And so that was just a big learning curve for me, I think,
Okay.
Just that side. I'm still learning, I'm probably bad at it. For all I know, but.
Me too. Okay. Yeah. So what are your primary sources of revenue then? It's part sales, service, manufacturing, engineering. I mean, I'm guessing most of it's engineering, huh?
Engineering. Yeah. It's all engineering. And I've decided that I want to stay very focused on that. Like, I may change what industry we do that for. So my long-term goal, I think there's going to be a big transportation efficiency boom down the road for aerodynamic stuff. It's sort of like dawning on them now that they need to do that. And so I think that'll be a big thing in the future, and that's probably where I want to go. But for now, no matter what industry, we're going to stay purely focused on design.
Okay. And so you kind of touched on it a little bit. It sounds like you don't do any advertising or marketing yet, and it's mostly word of mouth, but do you plan on doing anything?
Yeah, I definitely plan on doing that. I want to change that part about what we do, because I feel like when you go by word of mouth, you sort of end up being a slave to who you've been introduced to. You know, there might be customers out there that you'd love to have. They don't know you exist. You know, so you have no control over that. Where with marketing, you can sort of say, okay, we want, this industry or these people to know about us, and then your work will start coming from there. So that's really important, I think, for our future. I think it was important for getting us off the ground not to spend a lot of money on marketing, because I think that probably would, how it is with any business. First couple of years, you're just figuring out the processes that let you eke out a profit at all. And then after that, maybe you start being able to be picky about what kind of work you want to do or like that.
Okay. How many hours a week are you working?
Oh my God. Way too many. Yeah. Sometimes as much as 100, sometimes I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And probably, I don't think I've worked less than 60 hours for as long as I can remember now. Yeah.
That's a race car life, right?
Yeah. So you sort of get used to it. Yeah.
And are you married or girlfriend or any kids at all?
Married. Yeah, married.
And how does she deal with that?
Women don't like that too much, at least all the ones I know.
Me too.
So, yeah. So, but it's I'm kind of lucky because she's Japanese, and Japan is a country where people tend to do a lot of overtime hours. So, that makes it a little bit easier. Probably not like here. Well, I guess people that I met that worked at like really big aerospace firms tended to be, 9-to-5ers, or occasionally you get a big lump of work, but it's very different than that. And my wife's been pretty tolerant of that, but she does get on my case, when it's kind of out of control, which happens. So
okay. And so getting married, that didn't really change your work schedule at all. Sounds like you're still working crazy hours, huh?
Before I got married, I kind of thought, once I get married, I'm not going to be able to get away with working as hard as I am. So I went on this crazy like work spree, where that was when I was doing like 100. I remember I would sleep like 6 hours. I'd wake up, pull the computer up, start working, and I'd put the computer away and go to bed. And that was what I was doing for probably about 2 years.
Wow. Okay. And so do you spend a lot of your time doing the work, or do you, do you spend your time in the business or on the business? Like that kind of question. Yeah.
No, I do. I do, all the CFD development work. I got a contract CAD guy that is a draftsman, and that's taken some load off using that resource when I can. But as far as like guiding the test process, I still do all that. What shapes I want us to test. I really like having that control. For now. So yeah, I'm definitely knee deep in it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it sounds like you're the one managing the business then. You don't pay somebody to do it for you then, right?
No. Yeah, not at all.
Okay. And does the pay justify the time spent?
It might in the long term. I think I kind of had this thought the other day where I was sort of looking at retirement planning. I guess everyone does that in their 30s, right? You start thinking seriously about that. And I started looking at it, and it was like, well, all these investments out there are depreciating. Or depreciating because they're not keeping up with inflation, right? So let's say you had 1% inflation. Well, you can invest your money and earn 0.5%. Well, you're losing money, right? So I thought, okay, well, what you want to have is things that have a value, right? A value that's a real value. Something that no matter what happens with inflation, their value will be sold at a market rate. Then, and then I sort of thought, well, then owning a business and building up a business, build to sell can be a better choice than an investment. Maybe it's risky, but you can run it in ways that are less risky, or choose businesses that are less risky. And it dawned on me that was a really good investment.
So investing in yourself rather than other people.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. You invest in employees. You have to.
Yeah. Okay.
But investing in the business.
What are the primary tools of your trade? Is it like SolidWorks, Fluent, MATLAB, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we've got some customers that have a CAD requirement. So we'll use other stuff, but for most stuff we use SolidWorks for CAD. And that's actually, sorry, going to one, I might be skipping forward to one of your other questions, and you're asking me about like, killer products that I've seen. Like the last few years of SolidWorks have really improved. Like I think that to me has been the killer product out there. Like they've really turned it into a primetime CAD thing. And it used to be like a small, low end of the market CAD thing, and it's still sort of perceived that way. But I feel like it's become quite impressive what it does. But anyway, yes, SolidWorks, ANSYS, that's our two main things. And we have a whole bunch of little tools that we use for getting scan data into CAD, or cleaning up scan data, or cleaning up CAD data, or translating CAD data. We got a bunch of tools, and it's pretty crazy. Our biggest cost is software. The software license renewals are. Yeah. Sometimes people ask, aren't you just making pure profit? Why can't you sponsor my race car? And it's like, well, we've got $50,000 a year in software licenses, just the renewals
every year.
Yeah. That wasn't the purchase price of that stuff. That stuff, we did business for years and saved every penny to buy that stuff. It's stuff's expensive. Yeah. Electricity, it's a big cost for us. So
you actually have physical tools for like 3D scanning or that kind of stuff, huh? And maybe 3D printing as well.
Oh yeah, 2 3D printers, scanners. We got Artec 3D systems.
Awesome. Before we continue on, I wanted to take a second and tell everyone about My Shop Assist. If you own or work for a performance shop of any type, take some time to think about how organized and efficient your operation is. Our goal at Do It for a Living is to tell success stories in the industry and to educate you, the listener, on how to be successful in your business. My Shop Assist is a cloud-based shop management system developed to address the common shortcomings shops have. It enables you to track hours, pictures, notes, and even parts on every job at your shop. Manage your techs with the built-in calendar and assign tasks to them. The jobs can be exported to QuickBooks for accounting and billing. Customers can log in online and follow your progress on their car and digitally sign your work orders. MSA was designed to be simple to use and will help anyone from a one-man shop to the top-performing shops in our industry. Check out the system for free at myshopassist.com. Okay, so let's move back on to about yourself a little bit more. What's something that you personally struggle with in business, and how do you deal with it?
My personal struggle in business. I think that I don't know. I think I was always like this my whole life. Maybe like things kind of stressed me out. Like when things would go wrong, right? And when I was younger, it was that worked well when you're a student, because it was like you almost needed that stress to make you sit down and go, I've got to focus 100% on this, because impending doom is in 2 days when this exam comes. And that was good. But then in business, it's sort of you've got to there's always something going wrong, right? And sometimes going wrong in a big way. And any sort of emotional panic, you just can't have that when other people are relying on you, right? Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be the one that's calm and knows what to do next. And so I think that's probably something that I struggle with. Like there's times still when something goes wrong, and I try not to let anyone else see that, but I just step away from the desk for a minute and just like try to calm down about it. And then and invariably every time, as soon as you calm down and think clearly about it, you figure out a game plan and then you run with it. But I guess for me, it's sort of wrestling that emotional reaction that you have when things go wrong, and being able to stay in that mindset. That's probably been personally, that's probably too much personal information, but for me, that's been a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. And so marketing your business, we touched on it like advertising and stuff, but what's the most successful method really for promoting your business? Has it been like doing the race cars or maybe the street cars? I should say none of them are really street cars, but like, like the time attack scene or like the legitimate, GT cars, or is it just been like talking on forums or trade shows, or how do you really market yourself the best?
I'm going to say the number one thing was educating consumers. So I have a really good friend of mine that made this really good point to me once, and I sort of had that typical engineer frustration where I felt I'd worked so hard on making sure that I had the top performing products. It was like I have the best aero in time attack. I was really sure about that. Like we did Nemo, and that we felt like that was the tip of the iceberg, and that blew everyone away. Raised the bar for quite some time aerodynamically. No, people didn't have that much downforce until a year ago. And we designed that car in 2010. It didn't get finished till 2012, but people were designing in 2013 to be, to just catch that downforce number. So we had these good products, and I felt like, well, why don't you win when you had the best products? Why don't you get the premium customers, and why don't you do whatever? And so I looking back, that was just kind of silly the way I imagined that. But so what this friend of mine told me, he said, well, what you need is customer education, because if you've got the best product and nobody knows about it, then people need to know how to judge the best product in the first place, or to know that you exist. So I think that was it. Was every time that I meet these customers, I don't just give them a design for Aero. I budget to spend a lot of time on teaching them about the Aero, which they need to know in order to maximize the use of it, right? And then also that's really my number one source of marketing for the business, is that when they understand it, when they know how to discern a good product or not, then they talk about it, and other people talk about it. So that's been it, just educating my customers and anyone that I could come in contact with, and doing training courses about it, and that's it.
Well, it's probably how I heard about you too. I knew that you did the Nemo car, and that's when I requested friends on Facebook, and now I just follow everything you do. It's like really interesting stuff. So
yeah. So that's it. It's very, very grassroots marketing. Nothing fancy, and it in the long run, it can't stay like that forever. But weighing out budget of a growing company versus how much work we need to get in the door, I think it was a sound decision at the time. Okay.
And do you have a 1-year plan for your business?
Yeah. Yes, I do. So you're asking what the 1-year plan is?
Yeah. What's your plan?
I'm going to say my first and foremost plan is immediate plan for the next year is just growing in Europe, in the European market. In Australia, it's like there's very few people in motorsports in Australia that I've met that hadn't heard of me or heard of Nemo. That car kind of sent a lot of shockwaves in Australia, not just in time attack, but in motorsport, because of the lap time that was done and just how it was done. We had, the top speed on that car was 240 something kilometers an hour, and it ran a lap time that was, 5 seconds or something like that faster than a V8 supercar with, 40 kilometers less top speed. So everyone went, how do you do that? It was a big question. And even now in time attack top speeds with the nitrous cars and stuff, they're tilting to 285, to do 1 second faster. So I think it was a standing thing there, and everyone knew about Nemo, and it's kind of easy to sell cars in that market, sell designer cars in that market when you've got that reputation. But in Europe, nobody knows who we are, and I think that's probably the biggest motorsport market. Mm-hmm. So that's the next year, I would say, maybe a little more than a year.
So do you find there's going to be more competition in Europe, being that's where the hotbed of F1 is?
There's no doubt that in short order that will be the case. Even in Australia, we were sort of the first people to do this, like you were talking about. You don't know anyone else that does it. Well, now there's 2 other competitors out there, and there's 2 others beyond that have tried and failed. So it's once you create a market like that, other people come in, you get competition, and in Europe that'll be hard because those people, number one, will be local to them, right? Mm-hmm. Which always it's really hard. You've got to sell over the phone versus they can walk up to the door and talk to people, right? So that's going to be the challenge, I think. And yes, there will be competition.
Okay. And so, like, when you're trying to seek out business in Europe, are you planning on traveling there more often then, or is that you going to do it all strictly from Japan?
Yeah. So what I've been doing is, I'll have like I had a customer in the UK, and I just sort of said, well, I got to come out there and scan your car. So how about I pay for half of the flight ticket, you pay for half. And I went to the motorsport show and did some promotional stuff there, just walking around talking to people. And that was definitely worthwhile for sure. So, it didn't bring back any immediate work, but you know how sales works. People know about you, and then you hear from them later, and or someone asks about it and someone knows, so.
Okay. So, and this is a little bit off topic, and it's a technical question. So You talked about Nemo and like you kind of conquered the Australian market at the time.
Yeah.
When you design the Aero, I mean, you're not only just designing the Aero in like a wind tunnel in Fluent or SolidWorks. You're also, are you running lap time simulators against that to know that even with your 240 kilometer per hour top speed, your lap times are actually going to be faster than, if they had been 280, right? Because you're having more downforce and less drag.
Yes, constantly. So, I think that was probably one of our really, conceptually, there's a thing between conceptually and thing of doing it, right? Of achieving the design. But back in those days, people said, oh, you don't want to do that. That's going to be so much drag. You're going to slow down so much on the straight. And you really cannot directly quantify what that's worth without doing a proper simulation, right? When I've seen stuff where people will sell a wing and, they sell a wing and they'll list like the drag and horsepower that they come up with some way to convert a force value into a horsepower. So people think, oh, okay, well, if I lost 40 horsepower, what would that lap time be? And what is this thing worth? And, but you can't weigh it out like that because let's say if I've got 100 horsepower worth of drag from this wing, my top speed on the straight, but you've only got it at that speed. The first 1/3 of the straight, you might have less than 20 horsepower of drag. So you really can't do a simple calculation like that. You've got to simulate, and that of course becomes a never-ending thing because your simulation can't be accurate until you've modeled the tires. And so we spent a lot of time on trying to have very accurate simulation. And that's a super key part of what we do. And why Nemo was so different that way was, every time we got a result back that said, okay, well, we've got more downforce, but we've got more drag, of course. Well, how much drag is worth it? When do we stop? And you not have to worry about getting past on the straights with time attack. So we just kept going with it. If the car got faster, we just kept going. Okay. And that's how we ended up out there with, more than double the downforce if you go by published numbers of what our competitors had.
Are you allowed to say how much downforce it made?
Yeah, Nemo was around. It's hard to ask an aerodynamicist what the downforce number is because it's totally in motion as you go around the course, right? People always want to know it in some condition of, down the straightaway or whatever. So, it'll change 50% depending on how you measure it and what ride height the car's at. So that's a really big number to ask for. But
so give me a number at 100 miles an hour.
Well, I'd have to scale it, which I'd have to pull out a calculator for that. But at 241 kilometers an hour, so 150 miles an hour, which is sort of industry standard speed, it was around 2 tons.
So 4,000 pounds of downforce at 150?
Sorry, 2,000 kilogram, which is, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's 4,000 pounds.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, I guess my question is, what do you do when you load the car up that much? I mean, like you're having to. Does the tires not explode? I mean, you have special tires to hold, more than double the weight of the car?
No, they're spec tire that you got to run for that event. So there's nothing we can do about that. And that was a real big concern when we started on the Nemo project was about the tire loads because, back when Suzuka was designing on the GTP cars, there was a race years and years ago at Road Atlanta, and how everyone worked out that the Nissan cars really did have as much downforce as they were saying they did was when both cars in the team had simultaneous rear tire explosions at the same point in the track 4 laps apart. So it was like right down the straightaway, boom, 2 rear tires explode, car flips over. Happened to both cars, same place on the track. Okay. And then everyone went and said, okay, well maybe that's really happened. So that was a big concern for us, that the same sort of thing would happen, especially with a road tire. So I did a whole research project on that, trying to figure out what that load was. And I thought we'll probably have to control our downforce around that. And we came up with a solution, and we implemented it. And we just sort of dance around that, and we monitor it and hope that we don't cross that line. Well, we don't hope that we don't cross that line. We know how to measure when we're getting close to that line, and so we monitor it. And
on Nemo, on the Moto IQ article that I read, it was you're using load cells on top of the shocks to measure that?
That's right, yep.
Okay,
yep.
Are you using like IR ride height sensors as well, or any of that sort of stuff?
Unfortunately, that car was sort of thrown together in a big rush, right? People don't realize this, but that World Time Attack 2012 that car won was the first time that car had ever run in anger. It'd gone and done a couple laps, with the owner driving it and blown up the engine. and that was about it, right? So it was all kind of last minute thrown together. So we were quite limited in terms of what we had. So we only had the load cells on the trucks.
Okay, so I guess in your simulation then for your lap time, this is all in-house. You made it yourself, or using MATLAB for that, or how are you doing that? Is it like a script?
No. Yeah, so years ago we started out using Bosch LabSim, which we still have a license for that. But after that, we graduated into using a tool called Chassis Sim, which is it's actually made by a company in Australia. Really, really smart vehicle dynamics guy that runs that. And it's what's special about Chassis Sim is that it's a fully dynamic simulation. So he's got a system to get the bumps of the track in there, which is really important for us in terms of working out, bump stops and stuff for supporting those kind of massive aero loads.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what we use now. We do everything in Chassis Sim.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so we'll go back on a topic now. Sorry, yeah. I'm really interested in the stuff you do, and maybe I can do some of this offline too. And I don't know how interesting it is for all our listeners, but
yeah.
So, do you have a 5-year plan for your business?
My 5-year plan might actually make you laugh, but well, my wife laughs about it too. And maybe it's a little far fetched. I guess I kind of have. Maybe I have like the dream, and then I have the sort of more realistic version of it that might really happen, but my dream is to be sort of half and half between motorsport and like I said, transportation, efficiency stuff, right? So, and I want to have an office, and I want to have it all running on solar power. So it's sort of like we're developing these green technologies, and because everything we do is all about consuming electricity, the wind tunnel operation, the computers, right? Mm-hmm. If we had, a decent sized solar thing, we'd probably be able to be 80%, off the grid in terms of the electricity that we use. So that's kind of what I want to do. And obviously, as a simple, I want to grow to this size and this many people and do this much work. But that's probably less interesting than that.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's a kind of a unique plan, but it's very. If your business is geared towards making cars more efficient, then it only makes sense to have your business more efficient, I guess, energy-wise, right? So
yeah. Well, it actually started with some anger towards TEPCO, who sort of nuked this country and then raised all of our electric prices and is now rolling in the money while there's people that have been out of their evicted from their homes for the next 1,000 years or whatever, that are still homeless. So I was sort of like, I don't want to pay those guys a dime, and that's what started it. And then I started thinking, this would be a really cool thing, actually.
Okay, so we like to take action on Do It for a Living. Can you give our listeners an item they can take away to improve their situation at all?
I think it was scary to sort of step out of software world. There was an initial fear when I was going to say my keeping up with technology in the software world was going to take a hit in order for me to try and learn technologies for motorsport. So that was the first big one. I knew it was going to affect my career long term to get involved in what I had wanted to transition to. And then there was another huge leap of faith and very scary moment when you said, okay, I'm not going to try to work in the software business anymore. I'm going to move on. I'm going to go do this. And then you always wonder, like, is there really enough work out there for this? And you still wonder that every day, but it just keeps coming, and it's kind of a mystery almost. But there was a really scary moment, but then when I think about it logically and I look back and I thought, I actually feel like I've got more job security now, because now I know what's coming. I know if a lulls happen, because I'll go from being booked out for 3 months to being booked out for 1 month, and then I know that and then you can change stuff. You can do a campaign or whatever, a discount campaign or something, if you run low on work. Whereas when I worked for someone else, it was like they'd tell you everything was awesome, and then one day they'd be like, oh yeah, the whole company's gone. You're not even getting your vacation pay or whatever because it's bankrupt. So I felt like I ended up with more stability there, and so I think that was a little bit of a I forget English sometimes. What is it like where you just swallow your
pride,
your fear? Yeah, and you just sort of take a step. You just sort of say, stop being scared of this and just do it. And that was probably a big thing for me.
Okay, and this is kind of I guess I didn't asked this question, but it's something that I'm also interested in. So when you, being a contract, like you're doing a lot of contracts, as your business contracting to race teams, is it, or did you find it difficult pricing, to be profitable? Because, your software it's a fixed annual cost approximately, give or take, Is it difficult for you to write the cost, I guess, when you're I guess asking how much money the project's going to be? I mean, how is that learning curve?
Yeah, so the big challenge was early on, when you're doing something new that no one's ever done. How do you come up with a price? How do you even know what it's going to cost you, right?
Yeah,
you don't know.
That's kind of what I was asking. It's hard to ask the question when I don't know how to word it right.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we're having the same thing now where we're branching into transport efficiency stuff, picking up more work there because it's not something that we've done a lot. So you have to take a gamble on that. But in the early days, that real challenge was, okay, like a wind tunnel, building a wind tunnel model was a minimum $50,000 investment before we develop these new smaller scale wind tunnel technologies, right? So, you'd say, okay, well, have you ever met a time attack team that afforded $50,000 just to build a model, plus wind tunnel time, plus whatever? So it was looking down the barrel of that, of like, I've got to close a gap of the last GT car I developed was a $3 million aerodynamic budget, and I've got to figure out how to do Nemo for $8,000. You're like, how in the world are you going to pull that off, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing. So the biggest thing about that was just took years of work to whittle away at those costs and figure out how you could develop a car that's got more downforce than a Formula One car for $8,000. How do you do that?
Right. When a Formula One team is spending $100 million a year on aero, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously they've got rules and we don't have rules. That's a really big thing that's worth noting. But even still, it was just even doing that. Like I remember if I'd approached any of the major aerodynamic places that I worked with and said, hey, someone's got this. They want me to build a time attack car and we got to have 2 tons of downforce. So I told them after the fact what we'd done and asked them what it would cost to do that. No one would have estimated that, less than hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's just no way, right?
Exactly.
So it was sort of like, it started out as like that we didn't even think we'd have that much downforce. We just wanted to have more than everybody else. And, or have as much as everyone else, but have a better car. And but we just went, well, no, look at what we can do. And then that was what really sort of, got my mind going about like, what could we really do? And now the technologies we've got are so far beyond that, like if we could implement those on cars out there, it'd be, next level stuff. So it's quite exciting. That's what I love about it. It's interesting. And then you also get that feedback from each customer when they then can you imagine how excited the Nemo customer was when he went out there with that car and ran that lap time? It's a guy's car. Uh-huh. And he's built a car that he owns for a fractional budget of a manufacturer that runs 5 seconds faster than these, $1 million manufacturer cars. So that's always really satisfying too.
Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the last section here. So the quick answer questions. You already actually kind of answered this one, but tell us a game-changing product that you've seen in the last year.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's SolidWorks. Like I was saying, how much they've upped the game with what they do. I wouldn't recommend trying to use their built-in CFD for anything serious, but the rest of that tool is quite good. Okay.
And what software are you using daily?
So probably I spend the most time in CAD. Yeah, SolidWorks.
Okay.
And ANSYS, obviously, that's in the background 24/7, turning away.
Okay. So you're just running like Monte Carlo sims in it or whatever sort of thing?
No, actually we have a very unique process. I think a lot of people kind of get the sense from academic stuff that you do it that way, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really not the way we do it. I found that there's so much more. There's some things that you do that way. But for the most part, we rely on the intuition of a skilled aerodynamicist saying, I've moved in this direction. This is what it's done. I think this position might be work. Because just imagine, let's say all we had to test was the wing position, right? Mm-hmm. So you can come up with a mathematical thing or how you want to test through an array of positions. But I mean, if you define a grid and each step in the grid is, 1 centimeter apart, how many do you have for the wing position? You can spend the next 3 months testing wing positions. You do that, there's no way you're going to win the race, right? Mm-hmm. So we rely a lot on our intellect with that, just our experience, and saying, this is where we start, and these are the 3 places we think look really good. And we try to learn more from our failures than our successes. If we gain the downforce we expected, we don't look a whole lot into that. We look into it, but we don't look into it as much as we do when we didn't get what we thought we might.
Okay.
So and we've studied that, and I've studied that a lot.
So you're kind of following the 80-20 rule, where you can get 80% of the results with 20% of the work. Then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we sell this, right? We're selling this to customers, so we have to be cost efficient.
Yeah.
We can't. We're not a Formula One team, or some. Maybe I don't know how they do things, right? But we don't have, a dozen PhD aerodynamicists in 3 wind tunnels in 4 countries or whatever. We've got to take the path that's got the cost performance, right? Okay. So yeah, there's some things that we still do that, like a Latin hypercube or something, but we don't do very much stuff that way, honestly.
Okay. And what's your favorite app that you use daily?
Favorite app? You know what I think is a miracle application? GeoMagic, it's called.
GeoMagic.
GeoMagic, yeah, they make a tool for scan to CAD.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it's easy, to do that job. It's still weeks of work, but man, I tell you that for what that tool costs, it's, the tool I had before, it was $10,000 a year, software license, and that tool was like, 10 times better and 10% of the cost.
Okay. And what's your favorite shop tool?
Favorite shop tool? Like hand tool?
Yeah, I mean, you have a 3D printer as well. It could be like a scanner or something. But yeah, something you physically use, not software.
Oh yeah, favorite shop tool, Artex scanner, that for sure.
Okay.
That's it's like it's a handheld scanner, but the accuracy is plus minus 0.2 millimeter. It's not cheap, but there's nothing handheld that comes anywhere near that. Everything else will be like you've got to transport like a standalone device that it's like a laser positioning for the laser scanner that's in your hand, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's like you'd need to send 2 guys on an airplane, each of them, all their bags would be scanning gear, and it costs $250,000 or whatever. So that's my favorite one. That those things are amazing.
Cool. And what are you driving right now?
You're gonna laugh. I don't have a car.
Well, I can see that. In Japan, you got a lot of public transportation, huh?
Yeah. There's almost nowhere that I would go where the train wouldn't be faster.
Okay.
So for faster, and you can read a book while you're sitting on it, so it's very worthwhile.
Right. It's not wasted time; it's actually productive time, huh?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, and I do have a race car, which is in Australia actually. But
what kind of car is that one?
Mitsubishi Eclipse.
Oh yeah, that's right. You do have an Eclipse, don't you? It's a front-wheel drive one too, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. What do you see the future of automotive performance as being?
I haven't thought much into that outside of the aero part of it, but I can tell you what I've seen changing. Like if I look at the quality of the builds 10 years ago compared to now, like you cannot compare. Like they're just, I think the internet's done it. You read about all these build threads. That was a big deal. People saw how all the no budget builds are being done, and you see a lot of aerodynamic stuff was new. 10 years ago, the shocks that people would buy like a, replacement shock, junk stuff, now they're putting really not, Penske's are like standard now, so the quality of build has gone way up. I know that for sure. So I kind of think that will, continue. I think people will continue being more demanding customers. They'll want really nice stuff that works. You can't just sell junk anymore. Mm-hmm. And anyone that wants junk that'll be taken up by the China, copy stuff, right? So,
right.
So I see that as changing. So I think anyone that's got a lot of skill, they're going to be marketing more towards the high end. It seems like that's where that's changing.
Okay. Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. I see a lot of the better engine tuners and builders stuff all pushing towards higher market cars. So you see people modifying Lamborghinis now, and the GTR is obviously a very popular one, and people have been getting away from like, no disrespect to you, but the DSMs have kind of like nobody wants to touch them anymore because it's just the people who are working on them are just too cheap to modify them, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I knew a guy that used to make like downpipes, exhaust downpipes for DSMs, and then all of a sudden, he was like, "There's these ones on eBay now that are being sold for less than he can buy the raw materials for in the States, from China, and the materials, it's called the same thing, but it's not, and that was, that was sort of the writing on the wall. You knew it was going to go that way, and so that community started buying that kind of stuff, but someone with a Lamborghini, they don't want something of that quality on their car. They don't want to deal with the lack of reliability or customer service or whatever. They're willing to spend, for good stuff. And so if you want to be talented and you want to make good stuff, you have to go up market.
Okay. Well, how do we connect with you and your company?
Yeah, we got a website. It's AMB. So just like my name, Andrew Michael Brilliant -aero.com.
Okay. And I really want to thank you for this. This has been an excellent, very educational interview, and like you have a lot of really cool information to share, and I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. So,
thank you.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click